So I think we've actually seen a very significant evolution of leadership in terms of corporate sustainability and responsible business over the last couple of decades. Back in the millennium, you actually could be regarded as a leader if you were trying to reduce your negative social and environmental and economic impacts. People talked about an era of do no harm, or actually, probably more realistically, do less harm. And that was enough to make you a leader if you were identifying some of your most significant impacts and reporting on them, not necessarily doing a great deal about them. And then actually we had a recognition around the early 2000s, 2004, 2005 probably, roughly, where more organisations started to realise if we think about this as just about risk mitigation, we're missing huge potential. The trick is not just how do we reduce our negative social, environmental and economic impacts, but how do we also maximise our positive social and environmental and economic impacts. Actually, the great late Peter Drucker, who many people think of as the father or the grandfather of management gurus, talked about this just before he died, when he said every global issue and social problem is a business opportunity in disguise. And you might think of that as a kind of strategic integration era when companies like Walmart started to realise that this sustainability business was actually good for making businesses more sustainable. And I think more recently still, we've started to have more business leaders thinking about what really is the purpose of our organisation. How do we create value for our business and for society at the same time? And there's a growing expectation around the world that businesses will be able to articulate a statement of why they exist that will be authentic and inspiring and will be practical, will drive the difficult decisions. And you don't need to take my word for it. People like Larry Fink, who runs the biggest institutional investment fund in the world, BlackRock, has been saying this now for several years too. First of all, some people ask me, is this a management fad? And I say, absolutely not. This is only going to go in one direction. The pressures on businesses large and small to take these questions of their responsibility for their social, environmental and economic impacts is only going to grow. Employees, particularly younger employees, expect it. You're having many more consumers who are looking much more at the companies behind the brand, and rightly so. And I think probably most importantly of all, you've got many more investors, both retail investors and institutional investors, who are recognising that it makes long-term business sense. It's the value of their investments which is at stake here. So I think what we're going to see is much greater emphasis on what in the trade is known as a commitment to the circular economy. So you move away from the old idea of take out of the ground, make something with it, throw it away, to a circular model rather than a linear model, where you are constantly trying to reuse, renew, etc. And some of us talk about that as being a kind of the regenerative or the restorative economy, one in which we do make much more of what we already have. You can see it already happening in some industries like aluminium, for example, and that's, I think, going to become a much, much more powerful force. I've long believed that human resources professionals could play a much, much bigger part in helping their organisations to embed responsible business, corporate sustainability, corporate citizenship, whatever you want to call what we're talking about. And so some of the practical things that HR professionals can do is, first of all, to look at all the things that a good HR function are already doing, which are absolutely fundamental parts of the responsible business agenda anyway. So things like being proactive on diversity and inclusion, things like encouraging health and well-being, whether that's physical health, mental health in the workplace, and so on. things like encouraging employability, so that even if with artificial intelligence and automation and so on, the particular organisation can't offer a job in the future, the individual employee will be best placed to be able to find some future employment because they've been keeping their skills up to speed with the help of the organisation. So first off, it's actually recognising that many of the things that the HR function already has some involvement with, to a greater or lesser extent, are absolutely fundamental parts of the responsible business agenda. But then secondly, it is about thinking, how can we support other parts of our organisation to be able to play their full part in embedding responsibility and sustainability. So thinking about what are the changes in the leadership competencies that are going to be required to thrive and not just survive in this very, very different world that we now find ourselves in. Thinking about the way in which the organisation recruits. What is the criteria for recruitment? Are we recruiting on skills alone, or are we also recruiting on the basis of values and ethical values as well? Looking at the role that benefits and compensation plays in all of this, and how we have to recalibrate pay structures and things, because I think that the debates around in-work poverty are only going to increase. The responsibilities that a business has in terms of the differentials, not just between the CEO and the other highest paid people in the organisation and the lowest paid, but also looking at things like, do we have gender equality in pay and promotion prospects and so on? Do we have equality around things like sexual orientation? Because I saw some research that had been produced by YouGov the other day, which suggested that actually if you were LGBT, then you were going to be paid less on average than a heterosexual employee. Seems to me to be crazy. I haven't looked into the research in detail, but those are the kind of practical questions that, as our understanding about what is it to be a responsible business expands, we'll have to have the answers for. So I think that there is a greater role for the human resources professional that wants to grab it than has been there in the past.